Hey, I'm not dead. I know it's been a little bit since I've last posted, and I apologize. There just hasn't been anything to share with you guys. The end of last season and this season so far have been pretty rough. Haven't been able to get out to the plains yet this year, and I think that prime window has closed. And at least near home here in Michigan, we're on a track to kind of break a record number of tornadoes, but they've all been these quick little spin-ups that last 30 seconds to a minute or two or three, and then they're gone. So haven't had a chance to really grab, and they've all happened at night for some reason too, so I haven't had a chance to grab anything. So don't think I forgot about you. I have not. I'm pleased to report that I have not been sucked up into a tornado, despite some of the rumors going on out there in the comment section. I read all the comments, and I'm still here. I'm still alive, still well, still chasing, still trying to find something to post on the channel, and I appreciate you sticking around. That said, my gosh, the channel, wow, it's past 10,000 subscribers. I think it's like 12,500 now, and then the radar video, over 1 million views. Are you kidding me right now? Never in a million years did I think that the channel would ever get to that level. I mean, when I first made the channel, it was because of peer pressure from my friends. They were like, hey, you do storm chasing. You should post some of your stuff on YouTube. And I was like, okay, no one's gonna watch it, but sure. And then here we are, 12,500 subscribers later with a video having over 1 million views. It blows my mind. So thank you all for watching the video. Hopefully you've got something out of it, and I appreciate you sticking around. That said, like I said a little bit ago, I do read all the comments, and some of you guys ask some pretty good questions. And so I thought, well, in lieu of gnarly tornado footage from this year, maybe I could answer some of those questions. And so I thought we'd do that today. There's a lot of them, and maybe I've let this go on a little bit too long before answering them. So what I think I'm going to do, I'm going to split this into two videos. There'll be a part one, which is what I'm going to do right now, and then I'll also make a part two with some more questions. That way the video doesn't run on forever and put you guys to sleep and all that. But nevertheless, hopefully you find this interesting, and if you asked a question that I didn't answer and you wanted me to, just ask it again. Throw it in the comments here, and I'll do my best to get to it if we ever do a part three, if the weather gods fail to bless me with any kind of severe weather to share with you. We'll do something to keep the algorithm happy and to keep you happy. So, like I said, let's jump into some questions that you guys have, and I'll answer them to the best of my abilities. Let's go. Okay, so far and away, the question that I get asked the most is, what radar app or service do I use? Where do I get my weather data from? Where do all those examples in the weather video come from? And let me preface this by saying what I use may not be right for you, and vice versa. What you use may not be right for me, but that's okay. I have no reason to keep it a secret. I use RadarScope Pro Level 2, and I pay for it, but I find value in that. So what I'm doing out in the field, when I'm making these videos and I want to go back and look at archive data, I find RadarScope Pro at the Level 2 tier works for me. That doesn't mean you have to get that. That's not an endorsement, that's just what I use. I also used to use, well, I still have it, but I don't use it as much, is GR Level 3. That's a PC-based application that I can use to look at the next rad data, but GR Level 3 requires one of these to run. It needs a PC. And frankly, driving around in the country in my pickup truck with a laptop bouncing around next to me, it's not the most ideal situation for chasing. I don't have one of those fancy laptop mounts. It usually just sits on my passenger seat. And now with tablets, I can actually mount the tablet into the truck, and so I use something that's app-based on a tablet, which is why I use RadarScope. But again, just because I use it doesn't mean you need to, and vice versa. There's a bunch of radar apps out there. I'm sure if you've been to any number of weather-related websites, you're already getting targeted ads for some of the different radar programs. Kind of funny how the algorithm works, huh? And make your own decision based on what your needs are, the price point, if you even want to pay for it at all. If you don't, I totally get that too. But there's options. Just know there's options out there. Now, the other question that goes with this frequently is, well, I don't want to pay for a weather radar app. And I don't blame you. Maybe you're just a casual weather observer. You want to see what's coming to your house. The question is, can I get any of this data, specifically velocity, for free? And the answer is yes, you can. If you're in the US, the US National Weather Service does make some of the radar data available for free. So the website you want to go to is radar.weather.gov. And if you go there, you'll be able to access it. You can pick a radar site or pick your city or your local forecast office, and it'll show you the data relevant to your area. Now, I'll warn you, the National Weather Service's radar website, it's got the data there, but it's not the most user-friendly website ever created. The interface is a little clunky. But the weather data is there, and if you want, let's go through it together here, and I'll show you how to access that data based on where you are, and how to get reflectivity and velocity. Right now, I don't think there's a way you can get correlation coefficient, but at least reflectivity and velocity. So let's go through that together. So the first thing we're going to do is open up a web browser, go to the address bar, and enter radar.weather.gov. This will take us to the National Weather Service's radar page. You can see here we've got a mosaic image of the lower 48 up into Canada, as well as part of Alaska and Hawaii down here. Now, I can just click and drag to move this page around. I can use the scroll wheel on the mouse to move in and out. We've got some weather here kind of moving into the Detroit area where I'm at. We can also look for locations up here. So you can either do this if you're on a PC with the scroll wheel. I'll warn you right now, this isn't the most user-friendly interface on mobile. I recommend doing this on a PC. I can also zoom down here in the bottom corner with the plus and minus buttons. I can set in motion if I want to see the radar history and look at a loop. I can do that. I can also pause it if I no longer want to see that. But again, most people are interested in looking at velocity and reflectivity data for a specific spot, so I'll show you how you do that. First things first, again, I can just zoom into a particular area. Again, I'm from the Detroit area, so I can just do this. But say you didn't know what your local radar was, or you just want to have the system find it for you. Up here where it says location, I can click on this, and if you have permissions for your PC to use your location, you can just do this and it'll find what's closest to you, as long as you're not using a VPN. Or I can just start typing up here what city I'm in, what my zip code is. If I know the radar name, I can do that. So for example, I know my radar nearest Detroit is KDTX. So KDTX, it'll find it down here under local radar stations. If you don't know that, that's okay. I'm a giant weather nerd. I don't expect everyone else to be like that. But let's say I didn't know what that was. Say I just wanted to type in Detroit, because I know that's where I'm closest to. I can start typing Detroit. And you'll notice here that I can find these local radar stations, TDTW and KDTX. On the National Weather Service's radar site, anything that starts with a K is part of the NexRad radar network. So this is a WSR-80AD. It's the one located at the DTX Weather Forecast Office, which is the one that I know is in Detroit, Pontiac. So if I click on this, it'll automatically resume to that. And that weather radar is right here, right where this little donut hole is in the middle of the imagery. But if you notice, I can also, once I have a radar selected, these blue dots show up. These are the other NexRad radar sites. So if I want to see what's going on down here in Indianapolis, I can click on that blue dot, and there's Indianapolis. They got some weather moving through into western Ohio. Let's look over here near Dayton. Okay, you notice this is not the same. This was a diamond that I clicked on. This wasn't a circle. The circle's over here. What was that diamond? Right? These are also radars, but they're not NexRad radars. If you recall, when I opened up the search tab and I put in Detroit, I got two radar stations suggested. There was KDTX, which is the NexRad radar station in Detroit. There's also TDTW. So anything starting with a T is what's called a Terminal Doppler Weather Radar, or a TDWR. These are near major airports. We'll talk about this a little bit later in the video, but these are there for handling airport operations. So you can see these as well. I recommend, obviously, for what we're going to be looking at, the NexRad stuff, but if you want to look at an airport radar, you can. When you're in a navigation mode, these little blue circles will be the NexRad, the K-style radars, and these diamonds are the TDWRs, or the T radars. So TDTW is the Terminal Doppler Weather Radar for the airport DTW. That's the Detroit Wayne County International Airport. That's down here. If I want to search somewhere else, again, I can just click on these, or if I know the particular city, I can clear this out. I can search for, let's say I want to go over here to Grand Rapids, the western part of the state. I can just start typing Grand Rapids with a G. And here's Grand Rapids. That radar station is KGRR, which is also near the GRR Weather Forecast Office, and they've got some weather moving in here too. So that's how you navigate around and choose the radar that you want to see. Now, as far as switching between products, it's pretty simple. Up here, once you've selected a station and it shows you, you can look at the status of that radar. So we have a 2-minute latency. Everything else looks to be good. And here is where you select your product. So right now we're on reflectivity.
let's look at velocity. And there we are. We have our red and green color scale. So the radar sight right here, the little donut hole in the middle, we've got some red moving away, we've got some green moving toward, we've got some range folding down here shown by the magenta. We have the storm moving out here. Look, we've got a little bit of a red and green, but if you watch the radar video, you'll know this is not a cyclonic couplet because from the radar's perspective, red's on the left and green's on the right. So if there's rotation, it would be anticyclonic, but it's mostly not that. This is just a storm with some inflow and outflow here, although the little red section starting over here. But again, this isn't tight rotation. It's not a little bow tie. There's not tight colors right here in the middle. But it does show a little bit of red and green. So you can see things that way. Once it gets closer to where I live over here near Detroit, I can look at the Detroit WSR88D, which is the KDTX. And I can look over here, there's a little bit of green on the left and red on the right. Maybe the storm will do something. Maybe it's a little baby mesocyclone starting to form, who knows. But that's how you can navigate the National Weather Service's radar site. You basically can search for a site, or if you've already got one selected, you can pick any of the others from throughout the country by choosing the little blue dot that represents that radar site. And remember, the diamonds are terminal Doppler weather radar, so the diamonds are for airport radar. They may not be as full feature, but there's still things you can look at, especially if a nearby NEXRAD radar is down. Once you start learning the names of the radars that you look at a lot, you can save them. When I put a radar in here, I can put a star next to this to save it as a favorite, or you can just memorize it and start searching by the radar name up here. So I hope that helps. It is a way that you can see basic reflectivity and velocity, and it costs nothing to use this website. So happy radar hunting.
All right, so I hope that helps. Next up is I'm seeing a lot of comments on the channel from younger folks talking about how they like meteorology and they want to go into this. I'm talking people 12, 13, 14 years old who are in that point in their life where they're trying to figure out what they want to do and what they want to be, and a lot of them are looking at meteorology, and that is awesome. As they say, the kids are all right. So I will say that science is cool, weather is cool. You already know that, 'cause that's why you're on this channel. But I should also say that a career and a college program or a degree program in meteorology isn't the same thing that we're doing on this channel. It's not storm chasing. If you're lucky, you might be able to do a storm chasing or a field observation or data gathering program as part of your degree program, but the vast majority of it isn't this. This is more applied weather. We're taking what we already know about weather and science and going out and using that to view weather natural phenomena. So an actual meteorology program, it's going to be a lot of math. I'm just going to warn you up front. I'm not trying to scare you off, but I want to be honest. There's a lot of math that goes into this. So if you want to be an actual meteorologist, a lot of what you're going to be focusing on is how to forecast and how to model what's going on in the atmosphere. And to get a good understanding of how to do that and how our atmosphere works, you need to understand math. So in a degree program, you're going to be going through all the calculuses. You're going to be doing differential equations, fluid dynamics, thermodynamics. And you need to understand mathematically what's going on up in the air so that we can make more accurate predictions. As we know, the holy grail of meteorology is being able to say, okay, based on the information that we have, we're pretty confident that this will happen at this location at this time. If we can do that, we've won. But as I'm sure you know, we are a far, 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 far way off from that right now. We're getting better, but it's a very slow process. So if you'd like to contribute to that process and become part of that field, meteorology is great. I know plenty of people who do it. They all seem very happy with their careers. Just know that it does require some math. And again, not trying to scare you off. If you're young enough and you're not the greatest at math, well, good news. You've got time to get better. And if you're already good at math, well then, gosh, you can hit the ground running and I think you'll be just fine. But just know, here's what's coming. I don't want anyone to be surprised. So, great career, fun stuff. Don't hesitate to jump into the field. Science is cool. What's next? Jay somewhere in Flyover Terra 735 says, did I comment here before? I can't remember. Anyway, I'd like to point out that it's a good thing to have coffee when you watch radar. I agree, Jay somewhere in Flyover. That way, if someone jams your radar, you'll be awake enough to realize that it was raspberry jam jammed up your radar, and you may have to go plaid to catch them. Guys, I love the Spaceballs references. Please keep them coming. Spaceballs, if you haven't seen it, it's an 80s movie that parodies Star Wars. It's a Mel Brooks movie. That's all you need to know. One of my favorites. If you get a chance, go watch it. It's a classic. Then the strawberry or raspberry jam reference, that's a deep cut. You know, there's only one man that would dare give him the raspberry. Lone Star! Anyway, yeah, the Spaceball references are awesome. Please keep them coming. To those who have commented, I apologize for the lack of MASH references with radar, and of course all the Twister references, both the new one and the old one. Again, I didn't think the video was going to take off the way that it did. I tried to be funny here and there, but I was trying to make it a somewhat serious educational video, but now that I know you guys appreciate that stuff, I'll be a little bit more goofy. But yeah, always good times, always keep the Spaceballs references coming. That movie never gets old. It stands the test of time. Oh, what else? A lot of comments that, yes, derecho is pronounced derecho. Listen, I'm from the Midwest. We say things funny out here. Yes, derecho is not a word. Derecho is a word. You know, Spanish straight line because it's a straight linear weather system. So yes, derecho is how you say that. I'm sorry, JT, you were right, buddy. You say a word wrong one time and the internet never lets you forget. So there it is. Derecho, derecho, derecho. I apologize, internet. Please let it go. I'm sorry. There, I've made my amends. Lots of ways people are suggesting to remember the velocity color. So, listen, when I gave you my lonely radar story at the top of the tower, red light, green light, to remember velocity colors, I warned you it was going to be cheesy. And I'm glad you guys have some better ones we can share. So, a lot of people were mentioning that, you know, red, so moving away from the radar, red is like the taillights of a car driving away. And I think you could probably stretch that to say that, you know, if, you know, the green moving toward the radar, that's, you know, kind of like the HID or LED headlights in a lot of the modern cars that kind of have that bluish tint to them. You know, blue's kind of like green. You could maybe stretch that and make the argument. But yeah, red driving away, green driving toward. That's a good one. A lot of people bring up the red and blue shift from the Doppler effect. Yes, for optical Doppler shifting, red and blue are the colors that you would see. So blue towards, red away. And a lot of people ask, well, then why don't we use red and blue on velocity colors? And that's a good question. I didn't come up with the interface for velocity, but my guess is that red and green are opposite colors on the color wheel, so they're complementary. So therefore, red and green provide the highest contrast to one another. So when you put them next to each other, they contrast. That's my guess. But again, depending on how strong the winds are in velocity, those colors can get brighter or dimmer. So when red gets brighter, it'll go to orange, and I've even seen yellow. And when green gets brighter, it goes to like a blue, even a sky blue. So blue's still kind of there. It's just, you know, has to be bright enough green, and it turns into blue, I guess. But anyway, yeah, the optical shift from the Doppler effect, red and blue, you can do that. In fact, if you have some radar programs, I know GR Level 3 lets you do this. I'm not sure if Radarscope or any of the others do. But in GR Level 3, you could actually change the color scales. You could load in your own color palettes. So if you want it to be red and blue, you could. But just know that, you know, in the way it's always been, has been red and green. If you go to a third-party site like the Weather Service radar site, it's going to be red and green because that's how it's always been. Just know that. Another way that people are remembering it is that green and toward both have more letters in them than red and away. So if you had to remember by counting the number of letters, red away is less, green and toward is more. Fistandantilus, the Fuzzman, and Silver Shadow 013 have all mentioned that, so hat tip to them. Nicholas Ryan 7612 also mentions this, and they mentioned that they also use it for navigation lights. So if you're working like in a marine environment or with aircraft, you've got the red and the green nav lights for port and starboard. Same thing, red, port, fewer letters, then green and starboard. So toward, away, port, starboard, red, green, fewer letters, more letters. That's a great way to remember it. Captain Chromo 3189 says red is running, like running away. That's another great way to remember it. And one of my favorite usernames I've seen thus far, Bang Bang Beefy Mac and Cheesy. Love it. Says green means go to, and red means run away. So great ways to remember it. Thanks for those. If you have more, keep them coming. If you don't like my lonely radar, that's fine. I don't care. That's how I remember it. My brain works weird. I told you it was going to be cheesy. Make fun of me all you want. What's next? Confused Raccoon says, spends 30 minutes watching an interesting video about radar and windy boys. is now a self-proclaimed Windy Boy spotter. Okay. And will use this at some point in the future to impress whoever dares listen. Well, hey, listen, color me impressed. Thank you for watching the video. I appreciate you taking the time to not just watch it, but leave me a comment. And, you know, hey, if you want to go out and spot these Windy Boys, be my guest. But check this out. You can also become an official Windy Boy spotter, if that's something that you want to do, with the National Weather Service's Skywarn spotter program. So, Confused Raccoon, if you are in the U.S. and you want to be an official spotter of Windy Boys and other severe weather phenomena, head on over to weather.gov/Skywarn, and you can get the details on becoming a member of that program. Or, depending when you are watching this, all the local Weather Service forecast offices offer some sort of Skywarn training when the time is appropriate. So there's a winter spotter program, but obviously the one we're talking about here is the spring-summer convective weather spotter program. This is like the tornadoes, the wind, the hail, that sort of stuff. And again, if you live in the U.S., check the website for your local weather forecast office. A weather forecast office, or WFO, is the local branch of the Weather Service that's in your community, where the meteorologists who serve and live in your community work. And they work for the Weather Service, and they run the radar near you, and they do the forecasts and the warnings and all that. And if you want to be part of that program, I'd say like in the late winter, early spring, check their website. If you don't know what their website is, that's fine. Just go to weather.gov. You'll see a big old map of the United States. Click on the map as close as you can to where you live, and it should bring up your local WFO's website. And then, like I said, late winter, early spring, somewhere on that page, there will be a link where you can sign up for their Skywarn program. Normally they're done in person. During the pandemic, they got rid of that, and they were doing it virtually. There's talk now with the budget cuts, they might get rid of them again and do something virtual. But that remains to be seen. That's not until next winter, next spring. So we're done with most of the classes for this year. If you've missed it and you still want to take the class, there is an online one you can do through MedEd that's available anytime. And it's a two classes. You have to register for an account, take both of these classes, and then you can still get your Skywarn certification that way. And supposedly it'll let you call into your Weather Service local forecast office with severe reports. So if you have a tornado or hail or wind that meets the criteria, you can call in. I've heard that does work, I've heard that doesn't work, but give it a shot. And of course, you're always welcome to go to the local weather forecast office's program they put on every spring, whether it's in person or online. You can still do that even if you've taken the online one, and I recommend that. Some WFOs will record their trainings too, so you can view the recording, but if you get the chance to go to an in-person one, definitely do that, because the people teaching that class are the meteorologists that work in the weather forecast office. So these are your local people who live in your community who work for the Weather Service at the local branch office. So if you've taken the class, you get to meet them. And if you ever look at like the forecasts or any of the warnings that come out from your office and it has their name at the bottom, you can be like, oh yeah, I met that person. Cool. Put a face with a name. So check it out. It's a good program, and you can become an official Windy Boy spotter. So I can't recommend that program enough. I've been doing it for a long time. What else? A lot of people here commenting on the parade in Croswell from the weather radar video. So if you remember those poor kids in that parade that got blasted with a severe wind from the derecho. See, I said it right that time. And people were asking, the tent went flying and the people were kind of scrambling for shelter. The one guy saying, "Get underground, it's a tornado." It wasn't, but he was trying to help people, and that was good. People were asking, well, why did they have a severe warning? Why was that parade allowed to continue? Well, believe it or not, they did have a severe warning. That whole county was under a severe thunderstorm warning. And actually, I pulled the text from it. It said, in the severe warning, it said, people attending the Pioneer Days Festival and Marlette's Country Fair Days should seek shelter immediately. So they actually were calling out this event. That parade was part of the Pioneer Days Festival. So our local forecast office in the Detroit area, Detroit Pontiac, they saw this coming and they were saying, hey guys, it's coming. It's coming for you. We're to call out your event. And unfortunately, that warning, that very specific warning, never made it to whoever was in charge. So the parade was allowed to continue. They didn't pause it and let the weather pass, and you saw what happened. Now the good news is nobody was severely hurt. We don't like to see that happen. I mean, those poor kids are probably traumatized, but nobody was severely hurt. Nobody died. So the best we can do is learn from that and try to never let that happen again. So when you hear meteorologists or TV people saying have multiple ways to receive warnings, this is what they're talking about, because for whatever reason, the people in charge of that parade just didn't get the memo, and it was allowed to proceed, and we saw what happened. So, next up here, Randy Kessner 3805 asks, what happens if a tornado hits the radar? Well, it depends. Sam5992 adds to that and says, now I'm imagining a Category 5 hurricane approaching a weather radar. I mean, it depends, right? It could be, is it a direct hit? Is it a glancing blow? It could be anything from nothing happens all the way up to she gone. So, specifically referencing Sam's comment, if you haven't had a chance, go take a look at the picture of the Lake Charles, Louisiana radar site after Hurricane Laura came through. That's an example of she gone. Like, there was a radar there at one point. It is now missing. So that storm took it right off. Now, weather radars are, they're not invincible, but they've got the protective dome. They can stand up to a good amount of wind. But again, a direct hit by a strong enough storm, yeah, it could damage it or completely just wipe it off the tower, like we saw in Lake Charles. I think, did Brett Adair take that picture? I think he did. But anyway, it depends, right? Now, the good news is with the NextRad network we have here in the US, there's usually enough radar overlap that we can still get some coverage in that area. Though granted, because of the way the radar beam works, it's going to be higher up off the ground. So until that radar gets repaired or replaced or rebuilt, be a spotter, right? Go offer to give ground truth in that area. If severe weather rolls through and the radar just isn't able to pick it up because it's either not there or getting repaired, offer ground truth. I mean, spotter reports matter more than ever in situations like that. So there's another reason to go be a spotter if I haven't given enough already. Michael Bixler, 87, asks, I'm curious, are all of the U.S. radars operated by the NWS, the National Weather Service? Or are there privately owned or operated radars? Well, both. The National Weather Service runs the NextRad network. So all of the WSR 88D weather surveillance radars that feed all the data into our weather apps and the websites that we know and love, those are run by the National Weather Service. That whole program, that's their thing. They maintain the radars, they run the radars, they use the data from the radars to do their forecasts and their washes and their warnings. That's all them. However, around major airports, you'll also find some other types of weather radar. These are called TDWRs, Terminal Doppler Weather Radars. And these are run by I think it's the FAA or someone affiliated with the airports. And they have a different mission. They're not there doing general weather surveillance for all of us and providing forecast info. They're there just to support airport operations. So this is for the air traffic controllers. They're trying to route planes in and out of a controlled airspace, making sure they're not running planes through weather. So those weather radars are there to support airport operations. Now, depending on your weather app, you may be able to get the data from these TDWRs. So if that's the case, cool, you can see what they're seeing. Now, the TDWRs don't have as big of a range as the National Weather Service WSR 88Ds do. You'll see that, it's a much smaller area. And they're also not going to offer the same sort of analytics. You're not going to get the same kind of dual pole data from them. Remember, they have a different mission. They're there just to support safe aircraft operations. Whereas the general weather radars are there for many other purposes, and we're using those for forecasts and watches and warnings and a whole different beast. But that's an example of a weather radar that is in existence, that is not run by the National Weather Service. So they do exist. M-Mouse, or is it mouse? Mouse? Anyway, this person asks, Wales. You guys have a Wales too? I've lost count of how many of your towns and cities are named after stuff in the UK and Europe. It's bizarre. Well, I mean, if you look at the history of the U.S. and, when settlers came here, you guys were there first, and then we all came from Europe, and history happened, and here we are today. So it makes sense there might be some duplicates, but we also have a bunch of towns with funny names ourselves. I mean, we've got a couple. I remember I drive through Texas when I chase a lot. There's a town out there called Flat. There's another town in Texas called Ding Dong, I know. I've been into West Virginia chasing down through southern Ohio, and there's a town in West Virginia called Tornado, although I think they say it Tornada. They say it a little bit differently. But yeah, there's all sorts of small towns here with cool names. If you ever get the chance to visit the U.S. and you get out away from the cities and kind of go out into rural America and experience some of that Americana, I'm sure you'll find and come across some of them. The food is usually really good out there if you get a chance to stop. But yeah, we have tons, and the more I chase, the more cool towns I come across with silly names sometimes. But yeah, guilty as charged. There's duplicates. That's gonna happen. What's next here? Derpy Kugenaichen says, is the likely direction of cyclonic motion sensitive to the Coriolis effect? For example, would one expect to find green on right, red on left when monitoring a radar in the southern hemisphere? Great point. Yes, you would. So I got a lot of hate. Well, I didn't get a lot of hate. I got a lot of comments from folks who live in the southern hemisphere about the radar video. They said, hey, your video is very northern hemisphere centric. And yes, you're right, it was. And I'm sorry, one, I live here, and two, again, I didn't expect that video to take off the way that it did. So you're not forgotten, you're not unloved. Trust me, I apologize, but you're 100% correct. If you are in the southern hemisphere, everything gets flipped 180. So up in the northern hemisphere, we always say counterclockwise motion is cyclonic. Red on the right, green on the left. And if it's the opposite, if it's going clockwise, that's anticyclonic motion. In the southern hemisphere, it's completely opposite. So green on the right, red on the left, we still call that cyclonic motion, but it's rotating the other way. So in the southern hemisphere, clockwise motion, again, red on the right, green on the left, that is still called cyclonic motion, even though it's going the opposite direction. And then in the southern hemisphere, counterclockwise would be the more rare anticyclonic. So complete difference from the northern hemisphere. That is due to the Coriolis effect. Great job pointing that out. I should have done a better job in the video making that point. I apologize. You're not forgotten. I don't dislike you. Thank you for reminding me and the rest of the world that it is 100% different down there. So flip it the other way. Still called cyclonic and anticyclonic motion. Just watch out for the colors on the other side if you live in the southern hemisphere. Great point. VLUP9702 says, great video. I learned a lot from this. Thanks. Also, it looks like the storm is flipping off the velocity radar at 1454. Really? Let's go take a look. Yeah, it sure does, doesn't it? Listen, I'm no stranger to having the weather flip me off. Take a look at this. So yeah, I mean, some people see like birds and airplanes and obscure shapes in the clouds. I see a giant middle finger. So sometimes Mother Nature can just be vulgar. Hey, can I get any storms today? No? Okay. So, nevertheless, yeah, it sure does. Fermista asks, is there no honor code among storm chasers? All of those cars heading south to avoid the storm, and nobody slowed down and flashed their headlights to let you in. Error 418 adds to this and says, a chaser convergence seems really f***ing dangerous. This many people chasing a dangerous storm seems like a terrible idea. Well, depends on what your idea of a terrible idea is. I mean, some people will say storm chasing in general is a terrible idea. I mean, it's a risk-benefit analysis, right? I will say this, for me, to your point, is there an honor code? I mean, there should be. There kind of used to be. Chuck Doswell authored a really nice paper a while back about storm chasing with respect, courtesy, responsibility, and that was kind of viewed by a lot of us old-timers as, common sense, right? Be nice, treat people with respect and courtesy and follow the rules and, don't be a jerk. I mean, that's just good life advice in general, but nevertheless, it does seem to have fallen by the wayside. In fact, that could comment about just the way society has been recently, and you probably agree with me, but that's a different TED Talk for a different day. It does seem to have kind of fallen by the wayside. And I'm sure with what both of you guys are referring to, this has to do with the chase video that I had from May 20th of 2019, the high-risk day in Oklahoma, where we were supposed to get that giant tornado outbreak that fortunately didn't happen. Where the right-moving supercell, the cyclic supercell, decided it was going to cycle on top of me and drop that funnel cloud that went off to produce the Mangum EF3, that one. Yes, so, we see it a lot in the field. In Michigan it's not so bad, but if you go to the plains, you see it a lot. We, as a society, have kind of, money talks, right? And we've monetized almost everything. And tornado footage now is no exception. There are people out there who can make money from selling their footage. If they get really up close on a tornado, or if they get the first shot of a tornado, there are certain media outlets who will purchase that to air on their network, or their network of networks. And so there's money to be made. And storm chasing is expensive. So a lot of us, myself included, this isn't a job for me. I have a separate job. This is something I just do for fun. And it's expensive. You know, there's vehicle costs, there's fuel, there's lodging, there's maintenance, there's food. All these things take money. So very few of us make money storm chasing. Most of us spend money storm chasing. So for those who are able to make money, I mean, that's what they want to do. That's, you know, they might see it as their job. And I'm not talking about the research crews. I'm talking about strictly media people. So people go out there with cameras, maybe you call them stringers, or people who want to sell to whoever. But essentially, especially among people who are doing that, you know, individually, like this person might be trying to get the footage, so might this person. You see, I'm not going to call them fights, but you'll see people kind of being rude to each other or jostling for position, right? I gotta get the footage first. No, me first. No, screw you. I'm going to cut you off. I'm going to block your view. I got to get it. We've kind of created tornado paparazzi. And again, I mean, I'm not saying everyone does this, but there are some, and anyone who's been doing this for a long enough time has seen it. You know, I got to get my shot. Screw you, right? Is it nice? No. Is it cool? No. Does it go against everything that, you know, Chuck Doswell said? Yeah. But it's where we are. But not everyone's like that, fortunately. Most of us in the spotter and chaser community are good people who treat others with respect and courtesy. But it does happen sometimes. And if you want to go back to that video we were talking about on May 20th of 2019, you know, we can get mad at everyone in that line of traffic for not letting me in, but you know whose fault that was? Mine. The person whose fault for me being in that position at that time and not getting out of there when they could have, 100% me. I knew better, right? I've been doing this long enough. I should have anticipated the right turning cyclic supercell. I should have not been fixated on the tornadic storm. I should have parked my vehicle on the other side of the road so I was faced towards safety, not more into the storm. And I should have gotten out there a little bit sooner. I should have gotten out of there a little bit sooner. 100% my fault. I wasn't on my A game. There's no one to blame for that but me. We can get mad at others, but that was my fault. We all have days when we're off, and that was one for me. So, was it frustrating at the time? Yeah, but my bad. I'll take the heat for that. What's next? GK1669. Sure wish that I wasn't colorblind. Oh well. If I see storm chasers heading in a direction, I will go the opposite way. I mean, you don't have to. Most of us are pretty cool. I mean, despite what I just said like 2 minutes ago, most of us are pretty cool. But I see what you're getting at. You know, to address the colorblind thing first, like I said earlier, if you're red-green colorblind, or you know have trouble with red and green colors on velocity, or even colors within reflectivity, depending on the radar app that you have, like GR Level 3, you can change that. Change the color scales to something that you're more sensitive to. Give that a shot. And then as far as seeing storm chasers heading in a direction, well, I mean, I'll be honest, not all of us drive tornado tanks, or you know, we don't have decals and flashing lights and weather paraphernalia festooned to our vehicles. Like I'm one of those who doesn't do that. I chase in my pickup truck. There's nothing on that truck to identify me as a chaser or a spotter. Some of us are pretty hard to identify. And I do that on purpose. I don't like drawing attention to myself. I don't subscribe to any of that, so I try to stay by myself and just do my own thing. In fact, if I was chasing next to you, you probably wouldn't even know it unless you looked in the window and saw me. There's very little that I do to my truck to identify myself as a chaser or a spotter. So, but like I said, if you see if you see Reed Timmer heading one way in the Dominator, and you're like, yeah, I probably shouldn't go that way, I get it. Feel free, right? Go the other way if that's something that you feel you need to do. Nate the Great 454. What college did you graduate from? No, I went to the University of Michigan. I spent a lot of time in Ann Arbor. Both my undergraduate and graduate degrees are from there. Mark's Madhouse Metaphysicalm 2938 asks, why not put a small X-band radar on a pickup truck to assist in storm chasing? They make these for boats. Yes, they do. And a pickup truck is not a boat. So don't do that. Let's think about it, right? So what does marine radar exist for? You know, if you're out at sea and you're in open waters away from shore, and you know the National Weather Service's radar doesn't reach that far offshore, it's designed to cover radar on land. What are you going to do, right? You need to be aware of the weather, especially if you're out boating. And if you're out in the middle of water and you don't see a storm coming, that can be bad, right? So no one wants you to be high and dry, or in a boat. Would that be low and Anyway, you don't want to be without weather data. So those are meant for those applications. Now, on land, we have plenty of radar that can give us information as to what's going on. You don't need to have your own. You've got the stuff from the National Weather Service. If you're close to an airport, you can get that TDWR data. And those marine radars can actually cause interference to the other radars if you get too close to them. So if you have that on your vehicle and you get too close to a WSR 88D site, or if you're out in the plains and you see one of Dr. Werman's Dow trucks, the Doppler on wheels, you know, the big semi that's got like the big radar dish on the back that does this, and you get too close to that with a marine radar, well, that can interrupt what they're doing, and they're collecting legitimate data. So don't mess with them. Like they're trying to do their job. Don't be that person. Don't ruin it for the rest of us, and at the very least, just avoid the fine. If you get caught with it, you can get fined for that. So just don't do it. Not a good idea. Do not recommend. Sleuth2077 asks, what is a CC drop? I hear people say that when looking at the radar during storms and was curious what they mean. Well, Sleuth, CC is an abbreviation for correlation coefficient. So when you see someone referring to a CC drop or a CC hole, they're referring to, in a correlation coefficient image, there's that little section that may not be correlated. So we talk about this in the radar video, where if we see a spot that coincides with the location of a velocity couplet, and we've got like a very correlated area, and there's the one little section that's not correlated, right where that couplet is, chances are it's seeing debris. It's seeing things of all different shapes and sizes, and it's like, that's not correlated, and it drops it. And so that's just another indicator that we may have a tornado on the ground lofting debris up where the radar can see it. So for any stats majors in the rooms, CC is just normalized covariance. That's all correlation coefficient is. And when a radar sends a pulse out and it gets the return, it's doing the math and the standard deviations, and it's doing all that stuff to determine what's going on. And it depicts that to us graphically in the correlation coefficient radar product. So that's what we're seeing. We're seeing a graphical depiction of normalized covariance, which is correlation coefficient. So the hole or the drop is just that one little section where it's lower than everything around it. Everything else has got high correlation coefficient. It's got like that maroon, purplish color. And you got that dark blue to black area where it's not correlated. If that's right on top of a velocity couplet, that's a good indication there's a tornado there. So that's what they're referring to. Hope that helps. Lord Helmet 7309. Gosh, the Spaceballs references. Please keep them coming. When looking at velocity, how do you find or know where the radar site is? Victoria Violet 1849 adds to this and says, when we watch radar ourselves on TV or chasers on YouTube, like me? I don't do YouTube Live, sorry. How well do we know where the radar tower is to judge the velocity ourselves if we don't have the radar app? And Tade-san says, why don't they normalize the velocity data to a global reference frame? How do we stitch together that data when it's relative to each radar? Well, the short answer is you don't. There's a reason why we don't have a nationwide mosaic velocity image. The velocity data, remember, it's relative to a point. You know, motion moving toward or away from some reference point. If I were to come to you and say, hey, we got precipitation moving toward, you might say something like, okay, toward what? Right? You have to qualify that with a point. It's moving toward this point or away from that point. And in radar data, that point is the radar itself. That's what's doing the calculation of what's moving towards or away from it. And so precipitation or whatever the radar is tracking might be moving toward one radar, but it might be moving away from another, or it could be moving tangentially to a third. And so while we could probably do the math and do the vectors and figure out which way that precipitation is actually moving and then generate a reference point somewhere, why? The question would become why. Just because we can, should we? Right? If you're a computer science person or a meteorology major or both, and you want to do a project where you can break that down and then reconstitute it for a global point, hey, go for it. But is the Weather Service going to, put money or computing resources towards that? I can't imagine they would without a good reason for doing so. If we think we might have a tornado in a specific area and we want to look at velocity data, well, we'll just pick that nearest radar and look at velocity data from that radar. It's as simple as that. I don't know how much of a benefit there would be from a nationwide mosaic. In fact, if you were to be zoomed out at the nationwide level, tornadoes might be so small they wouldn't even show up because, remember, these are small mesoscale phenomena. So could you? Maybe. But will we? Not so sure about that. It's as simple as that. Why would we, right? Guitars and Music, I guess, says, awesome video, man, thank you. This helps with my fears of severe weather. So hopefully this summer won't be as scary for me this year. Keep it up. And Skittles JSAS D2 says, it really gave me the tools to put my mind at ease during thunderstorms. If I can understand something better, I could be less afraid of it. Well, hey, this makes me really happy. Thanks, guys, for saying that. And I'll be honest, I was just like that too. So let me share a story with you guys. When I was a kid, I used to be absolutely terrified of thunderstorms. I mean terrified. Like monsters under my bed, thunderstorms, especially thunderstorms at night, that'll freak you out. At least that's what young me thought. And I thought that way because I didn't understand them. Thunderstorms were my monsters, right? Nighttime thunderstorm, you'd see the flash of lightning, you'd hear the crash of thunder, it would shake the house. You learn about tornadoes, you'd see a tornado on TV. And I remember asking my mom and dad, like, Mom, Dad, could that happen here? And they'd say, well, yeah, but, and then I stopped listening. That's all I had to hear. Everything else got tuned out. That could happen here. And so I was terrified. I thought lightning could come through my window and zap me. I thought that a tornado would come at night and suck me out of bed. I didn't know any better. I was a kid. And so as I started to get older, we went to the library and I check out books on weather. I wanted to learn more about it, right? I had to understand the enemy. And the more I learned about it, the more I realized, well, maybe I was making it up to be a little bit worse than it was in my head, right? Lightning can't come through glass. Glass is an insulator. And if lightning strikes your house, the house is going to ground it to keep it from zapping you. Tornadoes aren't these sentient beings that go around hunting kids to suck out of bed at night. And that was reassuring. Cool, all right. And then, the more I learned, I did term papers on this in school. The more I learned, I went 180. I was like, well, this maybe isn't that scary. I kind of want to see one now. And it wasn't until college that I got the chance to go do that. But now, as an adult, I'm trying to go put myself in the path of these storms with the hope that maybe I'll get to see a tornado. So I'm actually trying to get in their way. I'm trying to go see them now. And I've come full 180 from where I used to be. Now, I'm not saying that's going to happen for everybody, but, Kipperchick8527, you make a great point. You say, we fear that which we do not understand, which I think is true. So the more we seek to understand, the more it may help lower our fears and maybe even form, a new interest. At least it did for me. So, don't, if you're scared by this sort of stuff, don't be scared, right? I'll tell you from experience, it's very hard to get in the path of one of these things. And number two, the majority of tornadoes that we have here, if you're scared of tornadoes, they're not these giant, violent F3, F4, EF5 tornadoes that destroy entire cities. They're the much smaller kind. So even if you're unlucky enough to be in the path of one, a lot of times it's not going to be that bad. And it's not to discount those who've been in violent tornadoes. I mean, it's certainly not going to discount your experience. But statistically, you've got a very low chance of having to worry about that. And if you're in that sort of area, just make sure you've got a good shelter, and everything should be okay. Have a way to get warnings. Have a safe place to go, and you should be good to go. When you learn how to read radar, it'll help. It'll give you some advanced warning. So I think that's a good spot to stop for part one. So let's cut it here. This will be the end of the part one Q&A. We'll pick back up on the part two here in a little bit. I'll post a part two video and get to some more of these questions. But thank you so much for putting these out there, and hopefully I've answered at least some of them. And I appreciate you taking the time to watch. So we'll catch up with you in part two. For the time being, thank you for watching, and as always, stay safe.